The Razer Blade 15 is the younger brother of the Razer Blade 17 Pro, which was a powerhouse in terms of performance as well as design, but it suffered with huge issues with usability as well as thermals. Will the dialed back specs on the Razer Blade 15 be able to solve this? Let's find out. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Epic PC channel, and today we're sitting down with the Razer Blade 15 Pro, which is the younger brother of the Razer Blade 17 Pro that we reviewed a few weeks ago. But this is no slouch in terms of specification. It features an Intel i7-10750H backed up with 16 gigs of RAM, and it also features an RTX 3070. In this specific model, it's the Max Q edition with a TDP of 90 watts, and these are the exact same specifications as the GP76 Leopard that we reviewed a few weeks ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see these two machines head-to-head later on in our benchmarks and gameplay. For now, let's look at the main differences between this specific machine and the Razer Blade 17 that we reviewed a few weeks ago. The Razer Blade Pro 15 features a QHD display, or quad high definition display, and at 15 inches this means that the pixel density on this thing is absolutely insane. It's also one of the first monitors to feature both QHD and a high refresh rate, coming in at 165 Hz. During gameplay like Metro and Doom, the color accuracy on this thing was absolutely great as well, and it features 100% sRGB accuracy. When we compare it to something like the Razer Blade Pro 17, which featured 100% Adobe accuracy, there wasn't a huge difference between the two, and honestly, they were pretty similar in terms of performance. So unless you need 100% Adobe RGB accuracy for something specifically, then this screen should absolutely blow you away. It's also way better performing in terms of color accuracy than something like the GP76, which had a 240 Hz display. Compared with the Razer Blade 17 Pro that suffered from a huge issue with reflectiveness on the screen caused by it being a touchscreen, the Blade 15 is excellently finished and doesn't have any reflectiveness issues, and it's finished in the same way that the 17 is as well. So it has a 8mm bezel, which makes immersion really great. The build quality and design of the Razer Blade 15 is absolutely stunning. It's milled from a single piece of aluminium and comes in at just 19.9mm thick. At 15 inches, it's probably one of the most portable laptops we've ever reviewed on this channel, and can fit into just about any laptop bag or laptop carrying case that you have available to you. It also has the classic Razer light up logo on the back, which can be controlled using the Razer Synapse software. Unfortunately, you can't change the color of this logo, but you can turn it off completely if you want a more discreet design. The LEDs are also the same as the Razer 17, and during gameplay such as Doom, it's reactive to your gameplay, so it's going to change to different colors depending on what you're doing, which is a really nice feature to have. If you want to learn more about the design of this specific laptop, then I highly recommend that you check out our other video, because we go into more detail on the design of this thing, and this is extremely similar to that laptop. On the benchmark side, in Firestrike, the 15 scored 18,688. Head-to-head, the GP76 scored 21,626, around a 16% jump in performance for the Max P variant. Interestingly, the difference in performance was much less noticeable in gameplay than in benchmarking. On the Firestrike Ultra side, the 15 scored 5,836 at stock, and the GP76 again having a jump of around 19% compared with the 15, with a score of 6,962. In TimeSpy, the 15 scored 8,327, with the GP76 having the largest jump in the test of around 23%, with a score of 10,309. So it's safe to say that in benchmarking scenarios, you can expect to see around a 15 to 20% jump in performance from the Max P to the Max Q variants of the 3070 from Nvidia. The Razer Blade 15 did not leave much room for overclocking, and we were only able to get the GPU to plus 100 MHz without stability issues, giving a score of 6020 on Firestrike Ultra. So I'd probably leave this machine at completely stock if I was to purchase one myself. Before we get into the gameplay of the Razer Blade 15, it's interesting to note that you can't manually control the CPU and the boost in this specific model using the Synapse software. Instead, you have to choose between different modes, either the balance mode, the gameplay mode, or the creative mode, depending on your workload. So for these specific tests, we used the gameplay mode, but it would be a great feature to Razer to include in future Synapse updates, just to match the Razer Blade 17 Pro, which you can manually change the boost on the CPU and the GPU. So now onto gameplay tests. Running the Tomb Raider benchmark on very high presets saw a score of 91 FPS in QHD and 115 FPS in FHD. Compared with the GP76 that has the Max P 3070, this was only a 5 FPS difference, which was pretty surprising to be honest. I expected much higher performance from the Max P version, around 10 to 20 FPS to be expected, considering some of the benchmarking performance that we had in our benchmark section. In Doom on Ultra preset, it scored around 130 to 140 FPS in 2K and a similar score in FHD with a bit more stability in FHD. The GP76 on the other hand was around 170 FPS for Doom, but that is only on 1080p resolution. Metro is really what pushed the Razer Blade 15 with Ultra preset and ray tracing on high, causing a pretty unplayable experience, with FPS at around 60 but sharp dips in FPS during gameplay and action. With ray tracing off, it gave a playable experience on Ultra with around 90 to 100 FPS average and above 120 FPS average on Full HD gameplay. Despite a super high pixel density, the Razer didn't look great on lower resolutions in games like Tomb Raider and Doom, and I'd probably opt to play at QHD and dial the graphics back to reach the refresh rate of the monitor on this display. On the right side, it features a HDMI, 2 USBs, and a Type-C. Again, it's amazing that Razer has included a HDMI on such a thin laptop because you can use a secondary monitor if you need to have one. On the left side, it features an Ethernet, a USB, a Type-C, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any I/Os on the rear, so it can be a bit complicated with wires going everywhere if you are to set this up at home. But I think as Razer has done this for the design of this laptop and the simplicity of it, I think that it's a good trade-off to have, and I commend Razer on their choice of not including an I/O on the rear of this machine. Unfortunately, the Razer Blade 15 doesn't have two fans underneath the trackpad, so the trackpad does suffer from some thermal issues. Despite this, it is a pretty good trackpad and has an almost Mac-like feel to it and has a nice clicky response to it as well. The keyboard, on the other hand, uses a new layout compared to the previous models of the Razer 15, and this is due to customers' complaints about the arrow keys taking up the position of the question mark. The arrow keys are instead very small and probably not something you'd use during gameplay. Unfortunately, on the RGB software, you can't configure each of the keys individually, and you have to configure the RGB on the entire keyboard rather than individual keys, such as on the Razer Blade 17 Pro. On the audio side, honestly, the audio is not great, and the saving grace for the Razer Blade 17 was the fact that it had a really nice surround sound. I think that Razer has opted for more of a software approach to solving the issues with the audio on this specific machine, but even messing around with the EQ settings and turning off the THX spatial surround sound software didn't really solve the audio issues, and the audio was extremely shrill at high volumes, and I probably would opt for a completely external headset if I was to purchase this machine. The Razer Blade 15 internals take a sharp turn from the Razer Blade 17 Pro. They seem a lot less well thought out than the Razer Blade Pro, and they feature two main differences that I don't really like. The first being that there's no fans underneath the touchpad, and the second being that it doesn't use Razer's vapor chamber technology and instead uses a traditional copper pipe solution. I would say all in all, this heating solution performs worse than the Razer vapor chamber, but both machines suffer from the same issue where the metal chassis becomes a radiator for the internals of the machine, and the palm rests become unbearably hot during gameplay. Another huge issue with the 15 is the cooling zones. The cooling zones are between the chassis and the screen of the machine, and due to the compact nature of the 15 compared to the 17, the space between the chassis and the screen is extremely limited. So the amount of air that can actually escape out of this zone is very minimal, and it causes some thermal issues, including throttling during gameplay and benchmarking. I must also admit that 500 gigs of storage is just not enough for today's age, where games are pushing 100 gigs per game, and we absolutely max this out with the amount of software that we had in terms of benchmarking and games. So you definitely have to opt to install another SSD on this machine if you're planning on purchasing one. On the ambient sound side, the computer runs at around 35 decibels just sitting idle, and around 42 to 47 decibels when you're doing gameplay and benchmarking. So definitely on the louder side in terms of laptops that we've tested here at Epic PC. The specifications on the Razer Blade Pro 15 make way more sense to me than those on the Razer Blade 17 Pro. They're designed almost identically, both being 2 centimeters thick for easy portability and can fit into just about any laptop backpack or laptop bag you have available to be taken to work or university. The difference is that if you put an RTX 3080 in something, like in the case of the Razer Blade Pro 17, you expect it to absolutely crush gameplay and deal with any of the thermal issues that you might have. And when it doesn't do that, it's just a bit of a letdown. But with the Razer Blade Pro 15 and its dialed back 3070, it's perfect for games like League of Legends or CSGO, and at a push you can use it for AAA games and either dial the graphics down to meet the FPS requirement or just play at a lower FPS. And you're also not paying flagship price for this specific machine. The 15 does have some drawbacks, such as the chassis becoming a radiator for the entire machine and the tiny storage space. But given that Razer is allowing you to have and increase the storage with an extra M.2 SSD and the trade-offs that you're making for design, I think that Razer has achieved a great synergy between gaming and an everyday laptop with the Razer 15 Pro. Thank you guys so much for checking out the review of the Razer Blade 15. Sorry that I referred to it as the Razer Blade Pro a few times in the video. It is the Razer Blade 15 base model. In this video, we're going to be giving away the Basilisk V2 from Razer, so check out the links in the description for that giveaway. And as always, if you want to check out the website for a more in-depth review, then you always have that content available in the description. Thanks for watching, guys.